Okay, I think my problem before with my throat was that I just wasn't drinking, so I'm gonna drink more on this one. Let's just get into it. Let me just make sure my audio is all synced and stuff. Where did we leave off? It was only yesterday. I can't remember. We're just gonna have to get into it, I guess. Okay, later in the evening, I get dropped off by a taxi at Angela's apartment. Oh, she invited us for dinner, right? I make my way up the building once I've arrived and ring the doorbell. Angela greets me at the door, holding a glass of wine in her hand. Hello, I greet her. You made it, and early too. Come in, come in. As I enter her apartment, Angela gives me an approving look. Lovely outfit, just right for the occasion. I know I can always count on your impeccable fashion taste. Oh, the check's on the dining table. Go get it while I finish wrapping up dinner. Yeah, I've just constantly been wearing this, like, bland white shirt and black skirt. So I have impeccable taste. I'm feeling a bit nervous as I walk towards that already set up dining table to retrieve the envelope with the check. And that's when I notice there aren't just 2 plates set up, there's 3. Who could it be? I don't think this is very loud. I can't tell. Angela, is someone else dining with us? I ask her as I grab the envelope. Of course, I hear Angela yell back from the kitchen. I'm gonna turn it up. Oh. Sorry, didn't. Wow, this is way more than my usual rate. Good evening, my lady. I spin around, startled at someone else's voice right behind me. Neil, I exclaim. Neil's behind me, looking a bit out of place, sitting on the couch, looking like he had no idea I'd be coming as well. I grind my teeth. She set this up, didn't she? Good evening, I reply hesitantly. Last time I saw Neil, he bolted right out of my store after saying he didn't hate me. I'm not quite sure where we stand right now, but all I know is that this is awkward as hell. Dinner's almost ready, Angela yells. Would you like to sit down? Neil asks, and he gestures towards the dining table. I'm a bit wary of this very polite Neil, but I nod my head anyways. Neil walks past me, his cologne lingers behind and it's making me feel a bit lightheaded, and he pulls out one of the chairs for me. This is weird. I take a seat anyway, and I'm feeling very self-conscious all of a sudden. What's his deal? Neil takes a seat as well, at the opposite end of the dining table. Now I feel like I'm forced to look at him, which is something I really do not want. The more I'm around Neil, the more I start to feel confused, and the flashbacks of the masquerade plague my mind. Things like kissing Neil. I look down at my napkin, feeling heat rush to my cheeks. Why does Neil have to be here? Luckily, Angela barges back into the room, carrying a large pot with her. I welcome the distraction, considering my mind wasn't going places I didn't want it to go. Considering my mind was going places I didn't want it to go. Angela is quick to set up the food, and it really does smell delicious. We all dig in. Nom nom nom. I'd like to say that dinner went well, but unfortunately, it didn't really. I was only half paying attention, listening to Angela talk about her time in Italy, and noticed how her glass of wine multiplied. Very soon she's drunk and starts to slur her words, giggling whenever she recalls something funny. Neil hasn't said a word the entire time. You should have seen him. He was such a wimp. Then again, he still is, says Angela. I'm barely paying attention, looking at my plate of food. Who? I ask. Nellie, of course. Neil finally makes his presence known, and he sighs in response. Angela, you're drunk. Please don't embarrass me any further. Who? We called him Nellie back then, and by we, I mean me, she said, sounding very proud. Nellie was always afraid of standing up to his parents, the silly little boy, so I told him, your really cool aunt will beat them up for you. Can't possibly embarrass me any further than this. Please stop talking. And did you? I ask, ignoring Neil. No, of course not. I was like 14 years old. Instead, I convinced Nellie to run away. It was actually quite funny. They had the cops looking for him all over the place. Oh boy, were his parents mad when they found Nellie. Suddenly, my interest is piqued. Angela is talking about that time Neil ran away when he was young, isn't she? That time when I found him at the playground? I steal a glance at Neil, and can see he's trying to hide his face behind his hand, covering his rosy cheeks. If it weren't such an awkward situation, I'd call it adorable. So I asked Nellie, where'd you go, right? And then he tells me how a hero found him. A hero? Like Superman? I'm not sure. The details are a bit fuzzy. Neil sinks into his chair even further, his hands now covering his entire face. He wouldn't shut up about it, how a hero like in one of his favourite comics came to save him and they both ran away from the police. I was actually quite jealous because I used to be the one Nellie looked up to, you know, the cool one, but I guess boys grow up. I lean in a bit closer. So this hero that you mentioned, do you know who it is? Angela throws her hands up in the air. Beats me. All Nellie would say was that he was some really cool boy, way cooler than me. You were such a little shit back then. She directs this last part towards Neil. Honestly though, it sounded like you had a crush on him. Was he your childhood love, Nellie? Oh, do you think he was into dudes this whole time? I mean, maybe he is. Neil's face scrunches up and he turns bright red. Angela, that's enough. Well, that's a turn of events. Is that true? I ask of Neil. Of course not, he barks at me. Don't confuse adoration with infatuation. I feel myself blush. He adored me. But I guess his parents got super mad at him because Nellie hasn't run off since. Where's your hero now, huh? Angela scoffs. She finally gets up from the table. I'm getting some more wine. You want some? No, I'm good, I respond. Angela wobbles away towards the kitchen. The sound of glass clinging and doors opening can be heard loudly, and I briefly wonder if Angela has tripped and fallen down. We already know what we're doing. I look over at Neil instead. I can't contain the grin on my face. So, a hero, huh? Not another word, Neil hisses. Must have been a really cool person from the sounds of it, I mock him. I told you, zip your lips. Is that why you said I ruined your memories? I ask, looking curiously at him, because I wasn't a hero but a heroine. It doesn't matter now. Neil looks away while crossing his arms across his chest. I guess not. I bite my lip, but it clearly bothered you. Before we can even continue our conversation, Angela is back with another wine glass. Why does she need another wine glass? She eagerly shares some more of Nellie's memories, all the while Neil stays silent. I crack a smile every now and then. Their relationship is actually quite lovely with the amount of times Angela has stuck up for Neil. Time ticks by fast, and before I know it, it's getting close to midnight, and Angela is passed out on the couch. I end up clearing the dining table, gathering all the dishes, and walking to the kitchen. Neil helps me out without saying a word. After we finish, I finally break the silence. Should we leave her like that? She'll be okay. She's had worse. I'll carry her to bed. I wonder just how many nights Neil has experienced just like this one. Well then, I guess I'll be heading home. Neil picks Angela up from the couch, who groans in response, but is otherwise fast asleep. He carries her over to the bedroom, and I patiently await his return. I turn off the lights. Should I walk you home? Neil asks when he's back. My first instinct is to say no, but in the dark, close to Neil like this, I can feel myself wanting to stay around him for a little while longer. Sure, I say. We leave the apartment together. Snow is falling quietly all around us. There's not a single other person in sight, but that makes sense seeing it's past midnight. Neil opens up an umbrella and walks next to me to shield us from the snow. He's so close to me, but it's not awkward at all. Are your hands all right? Neil asks me. I look at my red hands and stuff them inside of the pockets of my coat. I'm fine. I can withstand a little snow. We're quiet for a while, both walking silently on the sidewalk. I know where I live is quite far, and a taxi would have been much easier, but I guess I didn't want to leave Neil just yet. I guess everything's forgiven. I swing my purse back and forth, wondering what to say. Have you seen Angela's dress? I ask, the one I made. She hasn't been keeping it a secret exactly. Neil shakes his head a little. Well, that's Angela for you, likes the attention, I say with a smile. Always has. You two seem close since you were kids. Feel like if I keep talking like this, then I won't notice how I feel my heart beat faster now that Neil's walking closer to me. Yes, she's always been bossy over me. She's got her quirks and faults, but she can be quite lovely. I can see him smile as he recalls some memories. She's always been there for me, like an older sister. I admit my first impression of Angela wasn't very favourable, just some crazy drunk, but she's grown on me since then. Neil keeps quiet once more, and I realise why. I met Angela for the first time at the masquerade party, the subject that we've both been avoiding like it's taboo. And just like that, we spend the entire way in complete silence. It's not awkward at all. When we arrive at my store, I feel relieved that I don't have to stick around in this suffocating silence anymore. I stop at my front door, then turn to face him. Neil closes the umbrella and shakes it to remove any snow still on it. We're safe from the snow underneath the awning of my store. You didn't have to want me back the entire way, but thanks. Neil looks deep in thought and doesn't respond besides a simple nod. Well, good night then. I feel briefly disappointed that nothing happened the entire time. What was I even expecting? Sorry, Neil says in a tiny voice. I raise my eyebrows at him and want to ask him what he's apologizing for. In fact, I'm quite shocked he even has that word in his vocabulary. I didn't think Neil could ever utter the word sorry. For mistaking you as a boy, he says, and for my subsequent reaction and attitude afterwards once we met up again by chance. I lean against the cold door frame. You mean being an asshole? Neil huffs and glares at me, but it quickly vanishes from his face. Yes, he lets out a deep sigh. I was embarrassed that I met someone from so long ago, someone that I might have looked up to, and that someone turned out not to be the rough boy I imagined, but a beautiful woman instead. My eyes widen. I can't help it. My face flushes red at the abrupt compliment. I wasn't expecting that. I lashed out to hide my embarrassment, and for that I apologize. Wow, I didn't know you had it in you to apologize. I'm actually quite flawed, so much that I fanned my face a little to cool it down despite the cold weather. Neil growls at me. Don't test my patience. I recall the conversation we had a couple months ago when he said he only cares what a select few people have to say. So you looked up to me, I muse. What about now? Am I one of those people whose opinion matters to you? It's Neil whose eyes widen this time. Even though it's hard to see in the dark, he doesn't answer me. That's a no, huh? I guess that's why you pranked me that night. I didn't prank you, Neil hisses. He shakes his head, then starts to quickly pace back and forth at my doorstep. He seems quite shaken up. He begins, then stops to look at me. He's gesturing with his hands, but doesn't quite know how to start. It's weird to see Neil at a loss of words like this. When I realized that you had no blubbering idea who I was, that you mistook some other man for me, I went along, all right? Why? I whisper. Neil throws his hands up in the air, then runs them through his hair, grabbing a fistful. I just liked how you were treating me when you thought I was someone else. You weren't trying to be snarky with me. You weren't so tense and on guard around me. We weren't having some petty argument. We were simply normal. That's all there is to it. I take a moment to collect my thoughts. So Neil says he wasn't pulling a prank on me during the party. He simply kept the facade going because he liked how I was treating him when I thought he wasn't Neil. I remember back at the party how I realized that I was acting awful towards the person that I mistook as Neil, and how I must have been treating Neil all this time. But whose fault is it in the first place that I acted like this? Well, I wouldn't have treated you like that if you weren't such an asshole to me in return, I say defensively. I already apologized for that, he fires back. That doesn't excuse all the times you've been terrible to me. Then you even went as far as to seduce me. I absolutely did not. Neil's voice breaks as he yells. I didn't make you do anything you didn't want to do. Don't blame that on me. I wouldn't have done any of those things if I knew it was you. I recall the memories of me kissing him, and all those feelings come rushing back. The allure of kissing some stranger like I was in a fairy tale, and in the end it turned out to be Neil. The kind stranger was in fact a pompous jerk. I'd have never kissed him if I knew it was Neil. Neil looks down at the ground. You wouldn't have? I'm taken aback and I'm at a loss for words. What does he mean? What is he saying? I wouldn't have what? Now you're just being willfully obtuse. I grip my teeth. Oh, fighting music. Well, if you'd just be a little more clearer, then I can give you an answer, Mr. Simple and Clean. Oh. Just like that. It's a different kind of fighting, I guess. Just like that, Neil's hands are on the side of my face and I'm pulled into a kiss. For a split second, I'm taken off guard until my brain starts firing up again and I realize Neil's kissing me. My hands press against his chest to push him away and our lips break apart. I want to yell at him, scream preferably, but when I look at his face and see the innocent confusion, my anger melts away. Instead, I feel the sudden rush of excitement, the same rush I felt that night when I first kissed him. I hope this doesn't go into a certain scene. I don't know when these scenes happen. You are so annoying, I say before I yank on his shirt and bring him down to my level to press my lips against his. I focus on the warm feeling of his plump lips. They're just as addicting as the first time. Neil's arms snake around my waist and he pulls me into an intimate embrace. I feel helpless and overrun by my emotions, who want nothing more than to continue kissing Neil. The kiss is rough and clumsy, like we both can't get enough, and my mouth feels sore after just a few seconds. Neil dominantly presses me against the door, and the doorknob digs into my back. I break free from his lips, just long enough to open my door, and we both stumble inside. Oh. Yikes. The bell of the store jingles, but neither of us pay attention to it. I pull Neil closer to me after he slams the door shut. I can hear my heart pleading for those lips again. I lean forward myself to catch his lips. My tongue slips inside and I connect with Neil's. My entire body shivers, but it isn't me that moans, it's Neil. It's muffled, but oh my god, that's so hot, my knees spontaneously turn into jelly. Neil's arms keep me upright, and soon enough I find myself pressed against the counter. Do I remember this? It's fine. Desperately, I struggle to take my coat off, and Neil does the same. Our coats lay forgotten on the ground. I place my hands on top of Neil's shoulders, not breaking away from his tongue, to give myself a boost to sit on the counter. I wrap my legs around Neil's waist and twist my tongue around his. Neil grunts loudly, and his hands are running over my back until they're tangled within my hair. His tongue is now pushed inside my mouth, like he's battling for dominance over me, but I push back just as hard. The chemistry between us is undeniable, and in this moment, we just seem like a perfect fit together. Neil breaks away from me, and I immediately want to pull him back because I miss his warmth. He gives me a longing look while he takes a second to catch his breath. Then he's back. A hand wraps around the side of my neck, and soon Neil's lips are on the other side, sucking the sensitive patch of skin there. I harshly suck in a breath and claw my fingers on his back. His hair tickles my cheek, and my lips brush against the tip of his ear. I can feel Neil leaving a trail of kisses on my neck, and I am once more gasping for air. Maybe this is what could have happened if we weren't interrupted at the party that night. Or would you have wanted it to happen that way, really? More. I want more. Feeling more aggressive, I place my hands on the side of Neil's face to bring him back up to mine, and I press my lips against his. That's quite a nice CG. I think I do remember this. I lower my body a bit, pushing away any objects on the counter. The tissues that you wanted earlier that you went into the back for, they're right there. Also, this is not what my boutique looks like, though. And I pull Neil along until my back is touching the cold end of the counter and Neil is practically on top of me. I love the feeling of his weight on me, and I keep him locked in place by embracing him with my arms. But it's not like Neil is showing any indication he wants to leave, because he's writhing and squirming on top of me while letting out little gasps of air as he continues to kiss me. It's like uncharted territory, both of us exploring what the other has to offer. Our bodies are hot to the touch, and this is starting to go down a dangerous path. Neil nibbles on the bottom of my lip, and any doubts I may have had just fly right out the window. He kisses me like he's hungry for more, like he's unable to stop himself. His lips are so hot on mine. I can't believe this is really Neil devouring me like it's his last night on Earth. By accident, my elbow knocks something over from the counter. The tissues? Sending it crashing to the ground. The sound has interrupted us both, and we're finally apart and sitting up straight. But Neil doesn't pull back all the way, keeping an arm locked around my waist. It seemed to have been the umbrella Neil was carrying that I knocked off the counter. Blasted umbrella. We look at each other for a while, both a little bit out of breath. I curse the umbrella in my mind. Neil's arm finally slips away from my waist, and my body tenses up, longing to feel his touch again. We should, Neil starts in this really sexy voice, probably stop. Neil bends down to pick up the umbrella, and he keeps it close to his body. Immediately I want to protest and ask him why in the world I would want this to stop, but the more seconds pass where we're not sucking off each other's face, the more time I have for it to sink in, and I realize I've just been heavily making out with Neil. Only hours before I could have sworn I was mad at him, and only seconds ago he was on top of me. I sheepishly nod at him, wiping away any saliva near my mouth. All of a sudden I feel a bit embarrassed for acting the way I did. Neil finally steps away from me and picks up his coat from the floor. I feel even more awkward now, sitting on top of the counter, so I slip off the edge and stand on my feet as well. I should go home now. Have a good night, Valkii. Neil starts to leave. I grab his shirt and quickly press my lips against his. I really don't want him to leave, but if he feels he must, I want one last kiss before the spell is broken and I start freaking out about the entire thing. Neil leans in closer and gently responds to my kiss by moving his lips in sync with mine. This time, I'm the one who stops. Good night, Neil, I say. Neil gives me the tiniest nod and then finally leaves the store. I sink down to the floor with my back against the counter and groan out loud in frustration. Well, that was a good one. That was a good one. I don't think there's that many chapters left to go. Like, I swear there's like 25 or something. The past few days have been a whirlwind of emotions and uncertainty. It scares me that the things that have been going on. I don't really know what to feel or what to do. I haven't even talked to Sarah about it. I can't really put my thoughts and emotions into words. All I know for sure is that Neil and I definitely kissed, and this time I knew it was him. It's confusing because I'm pretty sure I wanted nothing to do with him for the longest time, yet right now my hands are holding my phone and I'm typing a message to Neil. That day when I left the ball, I took his cape with me, so here I am asking if I could drop it off sometime to return it. I realize this is just a thinly veiled excuse to see him again, but I choose not to think about it too much. Immediately, I get a reply text from Neil. I read it. It's an address? Confused, I start to type back, but before I can even start, I get another message. It's a single word. Come. It's almost like he's commanding me to come over. If I weren't in this state of mind, I'd have probably told him to jump off a cliff and dump the cape into a trash can. But I feel myself well up with a buoyant feeling and grab the stupid cape and head outside, phone in hand with the GPS on. The GPS leads me to a nicer part of the city, much like where Angela lives. I come across an apartment complex and I hesitantly stand in front of the entrance. I'm so nervous right now, it's stupid. I make my way up to Neil's apartment and he lets me in. Oh, my webcam stopped working. That's good to know. This game stopped working apparently. Alright, hopefully we're good. I think it's just my Discord that's playing up. Neil greets me with a silent stare. He looks impeccable as always, groomed and neat like it's been drilled into him from a young age to present himself this way. Let me just check his work. Yes, it is. Good day, he greets me politely as if we weren't just macking on each other. A little while ago, I stand before him in the entrance hall like a bundle of nerves. My heart's thrown into a tizzy as memories from a few days ago come rushing back to me. My eyes look over at his lips and I immediately look back up into his eyes. No, I can't be thinking about things like this right now. Bad. Horny jail. I need to return his cape, that's all. My excuse to see him is as thin and transparent as the fabric in my hands. Hello. I greet him back. Come in, make yourself comfortable, Neil says, and he gestures to his living room. Hesitantly, but with a skip in my step, I take a few steps further and enter his living room. It's just as spacious as I had imagined. All the pieces of furniture are sleek and shiny in design, and they're all carefully placed, like each one serves a purpose. Everything is spotless as well, certainly no cobwebs in the corner or dust bunnies hiding under the couch. It makes me feel out of place, like I don't belong here. It feels like a different world altogether. Nice place, I say with a tiny smile. It doesn't seem like you spend a lot of time here, though. Neil pauses, looking down. No, I spend a lot of time at the hospital. Sometimes there's simply so much work to do that I sleep in the lounge room over there. Who keeps the place clean? I can't imagine you'd do it, I say. Why, a maid, of course. Who else would want to do such lowly peasant work? I clean my own place, I say with a pointed look. Most adults do. And I've got other, more important things to do with my time than to waste it on cleaning. Neil fixes his tie as if to make a point. I bite my lip and give him a glare. Why purposefully try to provoke me into a fight with him? Shouldn't we be past this by now? Regardless whether or not you clean up after yourself, Neil, I came to return this to you. I brandish the cape from my bag. Neil simply takes it from my hands without a word, although it seems more like he's trying to avoid looking at me. When his fingers clasp around the cloth, they brush against mine and Neil jerks back in surprise. You fucking virgin. I don't really know how to react to that, except I kind of want to touch Neil again. My eyes wander around the living room and I notice something familiar. On his coffee table there's a white vase that looks strikingly similar to the one at Angela's apartment, the one she was bragging about. I point at it with my finger. Angela has the same one. You guys must have similar taste. Neil folds the cape over his arm as he looks at me, all elegant and dapper. I'd certainly hope so, considering I design them and she creates them. I raise my eyebrows at them. You design vases. Neil gives me a disapproving look. I expected you to have been more clever than that and figured it out by now, he says dryly. I look around his apartment, seeing only the most expensive designer furniture, wondering what Neil means by that. Does he make furniture, perhaps? Neil sighs after seeing me struggle. Angela's a sculptor, a very well-paid one, as you may have noticed. Ah, that explains some of the funny decoration in her home, I say with a nod. But you said you designed them, a hobby of yours. Neil stays silent for a while, looking down at the vase in question. His eyes are wavering, like he's undecided or conflicted about something. I suppose, is all he says. It's not particularly a hobby where you've got a bachelor's degree for it. I purse my lips, carefully letting the information sink in. Apparently, Neil went to college for what exactly? Interior design. So, wait, did that say he did go to college with it? I'm so confused. Honestly, I had no idea Neil went to college in the first place, and I thought he merely got a job handed to him on a silver platter from his family. But interior designer of all things, I had no idea. Is that what you do at the hospital? I ask. Did you design the entrance hall or something? Neil shakes his head with a chuckle. Ah, he laughed. No, I don't do anything of the sort at the hospital. My father would raise hell about it. He straightens his back with a sigh. No, I just do boring paperwork and handle negotiations with other investors. That's the most information you volunteered to me since the day we've met, I say, a little surprised at myself. Neil averts his eyes away from mine, looking bashful in my presence. And that's all you're gonna get, he says sternly. Now, if you'll excuse me for a moment. He gestures towards the cape on his arm and then walks out of the room. I awkwardly stand in the middle of his living room, not quite sure what to do with myself. So Neil has a bachelor's degree in interior design. I wonder what he was like during college. Probably not that much different from now. Still mean-spirited and arrogant to a fault. And yet I totally made out with him a few days ago. Crazy. The way our kiss was cut short, it still leaves me longing for more. It's actually quite embarrassing. I haven't kissed anyone like that in a while now. Eventually, I seat myself on Neil's couch. It's hard and uncomfortable to sit on, but it matches the rest of the fancy decoration in the room. I guess Neil prefers looks over comfort. Or, as he mentioned, he's not home very much, so he probably won't be sitting down on this couch for a long time either. Neil makes his appearance again, fixing his black hair as he walks over to me. I realize I'm staring at him, so I quickly look away. That black haircut is starting to grow on me. It looks way better than the purple, come on. Your couch isn't very comfy, I say jokingly. Neil sits down on the other end of the couch, and I'm a tiny bit disappointed he didn't want to get closer than that to me. You're right, he says with a sigh. It is uncomfortable to sit on. My eyes widen in surprise. He's not giving me some smart-ass comment in return. Angela got this for me as a gift for purchasing my first apartment. Oh, so you didn't really get to have a say in it. Neil stretches out his arm across the back of the couch, and I'm hyper-aware of how close his hand is near my shoulder. Had I said anything negative about it, I'd never hear the end of it, so I'm stuck with it. I chuckle. That does sound like Angela to me. She'd talk his ears off, berating him for saying anything bad about a gift she gave him. Why would you not choose these good options? They're the spicy option. Feeling daring, I shift a bit closer to Neil and lean my cheek against the hand that's gripping the edge of the couch, all without breaking eye contact. Neil's eyes narrow, looking at me with an intense gaze, but he doesn't budge. He didn't even flinch this time. His hand feels warm against my cheek. Now we're stuck together. He takes in a sharp breath, like he's holding himself back from saying something he doesn't want to. And then I can feel his finger twitch against my skin. He grazes it against my cheek softly and tenderly. He inches it along until his fingertip has nearly reached my lips. The tip of his finger brushes against them as soft as a feather. My heart rate speeds up at his touch. Jesus Christ, this is not... No, we don't know where this is leading to. It's not happening. The tension in the air is getting stronger. We both know where this is leading to. But then Neil's phone rings. He pulls away immediately and curses something under his breath as he pulls the phone from his breast pocket. Excuse me, I have to take this, he says, and then walks out of the living room once more. I sit there, wondering what could have happened between us just now. I won't deny it, I kinda want a repeat of what happened between us the last time we met. A text message from my phone alerts me, and I check it real fast. It's Angela. She's asking me if I've got time to have lunch with her today. In the other room, I can hear Neil talking on his phone as I type a reply to Angela. A few seconds later, Neil walks back into the living room, slipping his expensive-looking cell phone into the pocket of his vest. I'm gonna have to cut this short. My cousin just called me and wishes to see me for something urgent. I blink slowly, raising my eyebrows in surprise. You mean Angela? What other cousin could I possibly be referring to? Neil says with a sigh. The imaginary cousin who doesn't bug me all the time and cause trouble? No, I mean, she just invited me to lunch. Sorry. I trail off and show Neil the text message on my phone. This time it's Neil who has a surprised expression on his face. Looks like he can't process it and shakes his head. Did she now? My phone beeps again. Angela has sent me the details of our meeting place, probably some expensive lunchroom. Although when I read it, it seems to be the cafe that I go to quite often, the one next to the hospital. She wants to meet me at the cafe, I say. Neil sighs, he's definitely not happy about something. That's where she asked me to meet up. I don't know what kind of trouble she's caused or why she's involving you into her business, but we should probably find out what she's gotten herself into. I nod at him and we both leave for the cafe. Neil and I arrive at the cafe. I've been a bit nervous being alone with Neil all of this time, so I'm glad when I see Angela sitting at a booth in the back, a nice and quiet spot. Once she sees us, she waves us over. Darling, you look a tad nervous. Did anything happen on your way here? She asks while inspecting every inch of my skin with her wary eyes. I swallow. No, I'm fine. I'm just concerned about you. Angela turns to look at Neil, who takes a seat at the booth. What did you tell her? Don't scare the poor girl. I sit down next to Neil, making sure to leave enough space between us, lest I get anxious again. Yeah, anxious. I did nothing of the sort. Now, can you tell me what we're doing here and why I had to rush? Yes, Angela, please tell us why you had to ruin a nice moment between me and Neil. Oh, you didn't have to rush, you silly Nelly. But I did, however, want the both of you together. Angela sips on her cup of coffee. Did you get into a row again with my parents when you were drunk? Neil asks accusingly. Angela's mouth shapes into an O, and then innocently shakes her head. Why, of course not. Don't think so lowly of me. I was only tipsy at best. Neil gives her a glare, and he crosses his arms across his chest. I told you to stop engaging with my parents. They're not going to listen. I start to wonder just how big of a problem alcohol is for Angela. If I had to believe Neil's words, it seems like a reoccurring problem. Not that I really understand their family dynamic or what's going on. I feel out of place, like I shouldn't be listening in. Angela starts to pout. You know I can't help myself when they're talking about deciding your fate. Who else is going to have your back if your own cousin won't protect you? I don't need you to be a hero and cause even more trouble, Angela. So tell me, what happened this time? Well, Angela casts her eyes downwards, suddenly being more serious. I may have proposed to find you a fiancé. Neil looks flabbergasted, torn between surprise and embarrassment. He pushes the palm of his hand against his forehead in shame. Before I lose myself here, can you please explain why you have come up with such a ridiculous idea? You see, I know they've been making you work too much. You simply can't handle the position Marcus has given you. In fact, you don't even want anything to do with the hospital. But it's like they don't care. You're overworked and tired, and it's absolutely too much. Don't go deciding what I can or cannot handle, Neil spits out in anger, cutting off Angela's words. Why am I here again? This is sounding like a family dispute. When I tried to reason with them, Marcus would have none of it, not until I mentioned that I knew they were looking for a marriage candidate for you, and that I actually had someone in mind. Suddenly, I'm starting to understand the reason why I'm here. You did not, Neil says in a low voice, narrowing his eyes at Angela. Anticipating the worst, Neil brings his hands to his face. I said I would play matchmaker if they cut down on your hours. Of course, at first I tried to bargain for you to be able to up and leave the job, but that seemed to simply piss him off even more. However, Evelyn was intrigued with the idea of marrying off her son. Please don't let it be me. Please don't let it be me. I know they've been looking for a while now, so I struck a deal. Neil sinks his face into his hands. Valkii, dear, do you think you would be willing to help out my dim-witted cousin by pretending to be his fiancé? I let out a nervous laugh, as does Neil. I feel completely out of my element here. Oh god, she really did mean me. Neil is sitting next to me, not saying a word. I can only see that the tips of his ears are a nice salmon colour. I'm pretty sure my own cheeks are blushing as well, since I have no idea how to answer this question. Me? Pretend to be Neil's fiancé? What kind of TV drama did I step into now? You wouldn't need to do much at all. Just take a few cutesy pictures together, meet Marcus and Evelyn for dinner just once, and everything is set. And then what? Neil barks at her. Wouldn't they expect us to get married eventually? What possessed you to think this was in any way a good idea? Your drivel is madness at this point. Just how drunk were you? Don't be so fussy about the details. You could simply announce you've broken the engagement afterwards. I mean, people are sometimes engaged for years, you know. Neil gestures at me with his hand. You want me to pretend to be in some kind of relationship with someone like her for an entire year? Excuse me, sir? I take offense at that. I'm not saying you should stick together for an entire year, simply long enough to satisfy your parents and get them off your back. Isn't that what you want? Or are you saying you love being overworked at a job that you hate? Don't I get a say in this? I pipe in. Neil ignores me. As rich people do to the peasants, it's par for the course. It solves nothing, Angela. Let's pretend for a second here we can fool my parents. They give me less hours to work, and who knows how long this will last. It'll only be for a little while everything reverts back to my normal work hours. Fundamentally, nothing has changed. The only thing that changed is that you cooked up some ridiculous scheme that's not worth my time. Well, I was a little tipsy at the time, Angela admits with a small laugh. Nonetheless, if it means my cousin can stay in good health and not get sent back to the hospital for overworking himself, then it's worth it. Neil rolls his eyes. Don't be dramatic, I simply passed out and decided to stay in one of the rooms since I actually have that kind of privilege for being a forester. My health was in no danger. It clicks in my mind that he's talking about that day Angela told me that Neil was in the hospital, and I rushed over to him like an idiot to see if he was doing alright. So he was actually fine all of this time. So I don't need you worrying about how much I'm working at the hospital. I can handle it. I didn't ask for you to bargain with my parents to strike some kind of preposterous deal about finding me a fiancé. Least of all, why you would involve her of all people. Angela's eyebrows finally lower. She looks genuinely upset. Excuse me for worrying about you. And you know it breaks my heart to see you work this much. Your 20s should be spent partying and carefree to follow your dreams and passions. You shouldn't be wasting it away in some smelly old hospital among business associates. Well, you know I can't do much about that, replies Neil. Why don't you quit? I simply ask. Suddenly, the both of them stop talking and turn to look at me, realizing that I'm actually still here. They look at me like I mentioned something that has never even crossed their minds. Mind your own business, you shouldn't even be here. You have no knowledge of what's going on here, says Neil. I'm here because Angela invited me, I say, not backing down. And for some reason I'm being dragged into this drama of yours, so I ask you again, why won't you quit? That seems to be the most simple solution there is. Oh, believe me, I've tried, says Angela. I even tried to get him fired, but his parents are dead set on him taking over as CEO. They want the hospital to stay in the family. And you can't say no? It's not that simple, says Neil, exasperated. I shrug my shoulders. And why not? Neil can't do it, answers Angela for him. Maybe you can convince him for me. Angela, bite your tongue. There's no need to involve Valkii in our family issues. And why in the world are we even discussing this at the cafe? We don't need to air our dirty laundry. I really wanted some coffee, says Angela. Got a pretty big hangover from last night. So you were drunk, says Neil accusingly. Let's not change the subject. Neil turns to look at me. Get up, I'm leaving. Quickly, I stand up from my seat to let Neil out from the booth. Honestly, I have no idea what's going on anymore. There's just so much information thrown at me, and I feel like I'm too much of a stranger to insert myself into this. One thing is for sure, though. I'm not going to pretend to be your fiancé, I tell Neil to his face as he passes me by. An irked expression crosses his face. I never expected you to, he replies with a bitter voice. Neil shakes his head at Angela as he exits the booth. Angela, just stop with the crazy ideas or trying to work out deals with my family. I'm fine. Neil finally takes his leave. I sit back down at a loss for words. What do I make of this conversation with crazy ideas? I was hoping he'd say yes. You look too lovely to reject, says Angela. I guess it was worth a shot. I can't think of any other way to get him to stop overworking himself. I take a few minutes to collect my thoughts, and I wonder if I should say anything at all. It's definitely not my place. Neil is right about that, at least. Sorry for dragging you into this, love. Hope I didn't sully the relationship between you and Neil. Feel myself blush a little. We don't have much of a relationship. I recall the memories of the night that we kissed vividly, no matter how hard I try to suppress my thoughts. However, I do see he has a very nice and caring cousin that has his back, I say with a smile. I'm sure he's happy to have you in his life. You flatter me. You're such a doll. Now, why don't we drink up some coffee and catch up? Tell me about your latest ideas in fashion. Now that is something I can actually talk about. We stay at the cafe for a couple of hours discussing fashion trends, as well as Angela wanting to have another dress made for another formal event. I had a lot of fun hanging out with Angela, but in the back of my mind, I was still wondering about Neil. Boop. Alright. Okay, I will see you in the next one.